there, if you're looking for a book discussion on the book As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, then you're definitely in the right place. My book club just met about this book, and I recorded the discussion similar to how I did it with Lullaby a few videos ago. This discussion was a lot shorter. We were going to have 4 attendees total, but one of our members, unfortunately, due to an emergency, could not attend. Everybody's okay. It turned out to be 3 people discussing, plus my boyfriend giving random commentary, because he did not read the book. But this was our July read, picked by our member Lauren, so thank you, Lauren. I'm amazed because I started this book club a year ago, and we still meet and we still read the books and talk about them, and even when people can't attend the meetings, they'll still read the books and we get to talk about them, and that's really exciting. I will leave in the description below all the books that we've read this year and what order we read them in, so that way if you guys want to give some of those a read. I have reviews for most of them on my YouTube channel, but some of them I have not yet either edited the footage for the review or actually recorded the footage for the review, because I'm way behind on all my reviews. I don't really have a book look for this one because I couldn't really pick up on any kind of specific theme to take colors or inspiration from. So really quick, for anybody who doesn't know about As I Lay Dying, it is a classic. It was written by William Faulkner in 1930 something. It's a really well-known book. It is a classic. It's really well known for a couple of reasons, one of which being that William Faulkner wrote this book in 6 weeks, and he used a style of writing called stream of consciousness, which means that it wasn't really planned. He just wrote out the story in the order that it was written. When he went to edit it, he insisted that nothing be fixed punctuation-wise or, nothing edited or cut. This is a really organic and untouched story that came straight from the writer's mind and straight into your hands as a book. Really quick synopsis of this book. We follow a Southern family after the mother of the family passes away, and they go on this strange kind of Southern hero's journey to a town where she requested to be buried. And along the way, this Oregon Trail almost a series of unfortunate events, I don't even know what to call it, happens to them, and you kind of just follow their journey. So there's a total of 14, 16 characters or something that we hear from. So every chapter is a character, and then there's their narrative. So if you have not read the book, please go no further. Go read the book, come back to this spot, and then hit play, because we're about to discuss the book, and there will be many, many spoilers. So once you've read the book, or if you've already read the book, maybe grab a cup of coffee, tea, or your drink of choice, and sit back, do your makeup, or clean your room or something, and just listen to our discussion of As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. So without further ado, here's our discussion.
Domain version.
Oh,
because it's
perfect.
published in 1930, so.
What's funny is I downloaded the public domain version originally, and I'm like, and I'd never seen the book before, and I'm like, this looks really wonky with all of these weird chapters that are 3 pages long. So then I bought it, and oh no, that's how it's supposed to be.
This chapter that is 1 sentence long.
Yeah. Because this is actually my first Faulkner book.
Okay.
This is my first Faulkner book as well.
So, I guess let's start with what were your overall opinions of it?
I don't get the hype.
No?
I really don't understand. Okay. So, I saw all the reviews. I was really excited. It's actually a book that I've been meaning to read for a long time. I've always wanted to pick up a Faulkner book, and everybody was pick up As I Lay Dying. It's genius. And I think I don't fully get what he's trying to do, because it didn't get to it didn't get me to say, oh, this is brilliant. But, I kind of get what he was trying to do with, with Daryl.
Right.
At first I thought the main character was going to be the person who died, because it was As I Lay Dying, so I was paying a lot of attention to Addie whenever her pages would come up, which was not often, and I was also getting really confused with all of them. My mind was not giving them each individual voices, so I had to switch to the audiobook and follow along in the book, because I couldn't. I kept thinking that Jules' character did things that he didn't, that Vardaman actually did, and it took me forever to find out to figure out in my head that Vardaman was a child, not an adult.
So in the audiobook, did they have different voices for the different people?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that would be much easier.
Well, they only had 4 different readers,
but it was different enough to.
Yeah, and the way they spoke was consistent throughout all 4 of them. So whenever somebody would read for Vardaman sounded the same sort of like style of speaking. And the style of speaking was also getting confusing for me a little bit.
It's very heavy vernacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love reading about like American history in different points in time, and I'm mostly like either like 1800s like Civil War, or like there's also just a lot of sort of like Grapes of Wrath time period kind of pieces, and this was unique because it's 1930s, it's Mississippi, and so like I enjoyed it from like a historical perspective. I will definitely say that this like bouncing back and forth with all like I think it's 15 total characters that we end up getting. That's too much for my mind to process in a very sort of linear path. Yeah, sorry.
To understand this book a little bit better, I wanted to know more about Faulkner himself, which helped a lot with why he wrote it this way. Did you do any research?
I did.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Yes. There you go.
Which it's sort of like I read it, and then like I'm like, okay, I need to like understand more of like underlying things. Like even like the title itself, I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
How it's a reference to the Odyssey, and the actual scene when Agamemnon gets killed by his wife for having an affair, because the whole point of As I Lay Dying, which is what he's basically saying when he's dying, is it was supposed to show the analogy of, in that case, it wasn't a very happy family, and that there were issues with that family, and that was sort of the precursor into this book, where early on in the book, it seems like everything's okay on like the surface, and then like as you continue reading, things start bubbling up, and every single character has some issue that they need to deal with that's like not necessarily part of the overarching story, but has something that has to do with like their own internalization of their own characters.
Well, and I also noticed when reading the book that something physical happens to all characters but Daryl, and Daryl's the one who suffers the mental illness by the end. And I thought that was very interesting. I like his style of writing. I like the things that he does in the writing, because the writing is really smart. Like, I get that, but it as a story, I think, was not. It wasn't attractive, I guess, is the only way I can say.
Well, so, okay, let me ask you, because I want to back up to something that you said a minute ago, because you said that something physical happens to every character except for Daryl, who has a mental illness. And I don't know about that. I don't know that Daryl actually has a mental illness. I think he might actually be totally sane and just has like a world imploding around him. And like I actually see more rationale in all of the actions that he's taking than I think the others ascribe to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I almost view Daryl as sort of like the silent observer, and at the end of the day, the reason he's basically in an asylum is not because he's insane, it's so he doesn't have to face the rap from a police standpoint.
Right.
At least that's how I took it, that he's not literally insane. It's just unfortunately like what ended up having to become of his character to not basically serve time or whatever the punishment would have been in 1930s South, which probably would not have been good.
No.
I read an essay by a psychologist who dissected the book, and specifically about Daryl. She didn't go into like a whole bunch of the other characters really, but and she kind of like addressed that question: is he actually crazy, or is he just dealing with a lot? And back then, where they don't really have like family therapy as like a thing ever anywhere. Psychology was not really a studied practice back then. I mean, limitedly, but like, I have emotional problems. I call a hotline, or I go to a therapist or a counselor, or talk to somebody even. Back then, you don't talk about your problems. You don't talk about getting pregnant outside of wedlock because, and so she was talking about the psyche and how it deals with things when you can't actually deal with the problem. Like what things you can be driven to be doing physically, like burning down a barn or something like that, to externalize the inner turmoil that you're feeling, which brought a lot more substance to Daryl's character than I had originally read it. And then I watched the movie the James Franco made, and I felt the same way about the movie that I did about the book, where I was but it definitely helped me see Daryl a little bit clearer in my mind. Like, none of these characters came through clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because, like, before I even, like, dive into, like, specific characters and things, like, I feel like the book genre hops. Because I feel like
Yeah.
like you start with sort of like lower class white 19th, like this is what life was like, and then like the mom dies, then it's sort of like a weird like hero's journey kind of.
Yeah, a little bit.
And then like it just sort of becomes like tragedy, and then like happy ending kind of for one character. Like it's just very it's like that is not the ending I was anticipating leading up to it. I was like, what? Because like at the end of the day, again, like if we look at like historical literature of that period, a lot of the things had to do like depression was going through, like who has stuff, who doesn't have stuff, like have and have nots. And at the end of the day, like the guy who ends up with everything is, I always get his name wrong because it's so close to the mom. It's Ants.
Yeah.
And everyone else loses something, like breaks a leg. In fact, there's even a passage I can't remember where they're like this person doesn't have that. This person doesn't have it in reference to the broken leg. Then you have Daryl who loses his mind essentially, ends up in an asylum, and then you have Jewel who loses the horse. At least
because of Ants.
Because of Ants.
Yeah.
Like Ants is the only one who essentially ends out on top, and very, very far on top of this entire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he plays every situation purely selfishly, and nobody else really is coming from a position of selfishness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I can kind of get the genius behind this right now. Like, or not now, but like, I don't know. I get it. It's weird. I get the genius behind the story, but I also am still not impressed with it. But I also wonder if that's because I have read a lot of books like this, but more modernized. And so when you think about when it was written, like, it's super revolutionary in talking about, like, in openly talking about abortion,
wedlock.
and psychology, I guess, really, where psychology was not something anybody put faith in at the time. And like, so
where I find the genius in the book and why I chose it is
this is your selection.
This was my selection.
Oh, okay.
I am a sucker for varying narrative styles. And so this was a book that I read in high school for English 3 honors. And I just fell in love with the stream of consciousness kind of writing style. And it's not something that's done frequently, and it's not something that's done well.
You wrote this in 6 weeks.
Yeah, you wrote it in 6 weeks at nighttime, working at a plant the whole time.
Yeah, I've been
I
writing.
The quote, he's like, if I ever become rich, like I'll buy a dynamo because I find it like soothing for my writing or something like that.
I've been writing one story for like 2 years, and I'm only like a third of the way done with it. Like,
yeah, it is interesting. When was I don't know if you guys ever like highlighted passages, so I just want to read a quick passage, which is because there is a lot of amazing just sort of like writing.
There is there's really great one-liners and stuff like that I was like.
So I had highlighted this before I researched anything because like I thought it basically reminded me of the Scarlet Letter, and then like I read research and it sounded like other people thought the same thing. While I waited for him in the woods, waiting for him before he saw me, I would think of him as dressed in sin. I would think of him as thinking of me dressed also in sin, he the more beautiful since the garment which he had exchanged for sin was sanctified. I would think of the sin as garments which we would remove in order to shape and coerce the terrible blood to the forlorn echo of the dead, word high in the air. And that sort of just like made me think of like Scarlet Letter, like having that sort of branding. When was Scarlet Letter written?
I don't know.
I think late 1800s.
Yeah, so like I mean, so I was wondering if this was even an allusion from him to the Scarlet Letter.
It might be.
So
I think Hawthorne came before him.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, not just a single passage in the story, but the way that it develops is you have what almost ends up being like a climactic scene where they're fording the river, and you have Cash who ends up with a broken leg. And then you have action. Cash is thinking, well, I warned them not to do, and then nothing. And then you get 3 straight chapters that are all just inner monologue of like things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
And Cora has this super naive opinion about, all of the other characters in the story.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, they're so godful, and they're so godful. And then the very end of, and I need to find it, but the very end of Addie's monologue from that, which is you get her monologue after she's dead.
Yeah.
Which is also super cool. is she's talking about religion. Give me like 2 seconds. He says so they're talking. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, go for it.
No.
So they're talking all about like basically the nature of sin, and she says because people to whom sin is just a matter of words, to them salvation is just words too.
Oh, I like that
That's
one.
a good
Such
one,
a
too.
good one-liner, like to end, like it's the last line that you get from her in the whole thing after she's dead, and then you go straight to Cash with a broken leg and like all hell breaking loose on the other side of the river.
No, that is good. I did not pick that one. I forgot. That's pretty cool.
I think I the only quotes that I made note of physically in my book, I made mental notes and been like, oh, I should write that down later, like to mark it somewhere in my book, but I didn't. Was actually something a line I would like to just quote this book when speaking to certain people of faith, I guess. Or I'm going to call them religious people, because people of faith I feel like are pretty honest and humble in their faith, but people who are just religious can drive me crazy a little. And I love the line, is it out of your vanity that you would judge sin and salvation in the Lord's place?
Who's that from, Cora?
This one, yeah, it's Cora. I do love that line, like, of just, like, that has always been one of my biggest points to people, especially when it comes to this topic of gay marriage or a woman's choice, is just, they're like, it's a sin, the Lord says it's a sin, and they'll go to hell for it. And I'm like, but literally, according to your religion, your God died so you wouldn't have to make that judgment on other people. Like, if they are going to hell, and if they are sinning, that is not your judgment to make. When they die, they will be judged by God, and God will decide whether or not they will be let into heaven or if they will go to hell. But you don't get to prevent people from doing it because you believe that God will judge them for that. Like, that is my whole point of their religion. Like, you know, and so I was like, oh my God, somebody wrote it in a book, like, in 1930. So I was really excited about that line, that existed even back then. Like, he made a point to write that. So I feel like me and William Faulkner agree on that point, because if you would write it for one of his characters, being a man of faith himself, then I feel like he understood the difference between faith and religion.
Yeah, I guess keeping on the God train. I'd also highlighted the part where it's Jewel, and she's talking about everyone being out there, they're like buzzards, just fanning themselves. And then just like a few sentences down, it says, if it had just been me when Cash fell off the church, if it had just been me when Paul laid sick with a load of wood fell on him, it would not be happening with every bastard in the county coming in to stare at her, because if there is a God, what the hell is he for? Like, it's just this very interesting, again, for this time period, to sort of have all of this sort of, like, religious connection and sort of, like, introspection is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially for a man from the South.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think having the kind of perspective... So, to grow up jaded in the 1930s South must have been really freaking difficult, because you're surrounded by religion your entire life. And, I mean, the same could be said of growing up in the South today, but to see all of these things and to question them, and to not have anyone else around you questioning them, and to know that they really ought to be questioned just for the sake of questioning, really, is something that I think not many people possess, and it takes a certain level of introspection to get that. And so I think that probably fueled like what he ended up writing a lot in terms of like how he viewed religion.
Yeah, because he did head north for a good time, and I'm sure up there he was greeted by minds like his, especially at university, sounds like. So I think that this book, because this book was post him spending time in the north, was kind of like a response to his upbringing, almost.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think I read that he wrote most of the novels were set in the same county in Mississippi, which was the county that he was from.
Yeah,
like
I think you're right.
Version of like where he was from.
So I think you're right. Like, he was probably very jaded.
Yeah. And then the last thing I had highlighted, which is obviously like, I guess this now I know where this comes from, which is the "My mother is a fish" quote from Vardaman. But what I thought was interesting is if you go back like 20 pages or so, there's a really great thing between Vardaman and Ants where they caught the fish, the cleaning scene, And Ant says, "You clean it." He don't look around. Vardaman comes back and picks up the fish. Slides out of his hand, smearing wet dirt onto him, and flops down, dirtying itself again, gape-mouthed, goggle-eyed, hiding into the dust like it was ashamed of being dead, like it was in a hurry to get back hit again. And what I thought was interesting about this, and then later sort of the reconnection of the your mother is a fish, sort of like when we learn even later on, like with Addie's sort of like retrospective, like she really was like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I was getting from like sort of this kind of like passaging. So,
Okay, that's really interesting analysis. I like that.
That is cool to tie all that together. Because that line at first to me was like really strange.
Yeah.
And like, then I watched the movie actually, and that's when I actually made the connection of, oh, okay, I get what he's saying now. I thought he was just like a child, like making a point that like he's a child, you know, and kids say the darndest things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like from the child's perspective, it's like I caught a fish.
That's how he
my mom
processes.
died, and that's how he which again, to give full credit to the writer, like in addition to how language was used, the type of language that used that was appropriate for the age of the characters was also pretty spot on, from both as young as Vardaman, like what his dialected language would be, to like how Ants is using a lot of shorthand, a lot of other things that somebody older would have done. So. And
Vardaman is one of my favorite characters to read, just because, one, it's so hard to parse through, where like you can get a couple sentences in and be like, wait, what? And then have to go back and try to read it again because you don't actually understand what the point is being made is. But because he's able to break down the psychology of, like, what is he, a 3-year-old, to quite that extent, and come up with these thought processes that I don't think many others could actually reliably recreate.
Yeah.
Is something that's really special.
That's true. Just child psychology. That's cool. That's a good point. Vardaman was not my favorite character.
No?
Not mine either.
I mean, for much of his passages, it was just like several pages of gibberish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting, just like when you're thinking of, I think Daryl honestly is probably my favorite one to actually like read through like everything, but
I like Jewel.
Jewel was also really good.
I just feel so bad for Jewel.
I know. Like in the essay I read, one of the lines is like blah 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 blah, and him being so clearly the most intelligent of the family.
Yeah.
To live in a family with people who are less than your mental abilities is probably got to be one of the most frustrating things. I think some people can relate.
Well, I mean, that was even a great scene with Jewel at the end where basically, like, Ants is like, well, we need your horse. And he's like, screw that. And, like, right off to the sunset. But then at the end of the day, like, even though they don't specifically state it, like, Jewel brought the horse in. That's how they got the mules and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Also, the irony of Cash being named Cash, and he's the one who ends up having to give away, like, his money and his bad. Like, the things like being like petty Cash. The name Dewey Dell, which is interesting because it's the only character that has a double name.
Oh, you know what?
So what makes that interesting to you?
I just think it's just like it's so off the beaten track from all of the other names. Like, it's just like when I hear Dewey Dell, like I feel like some hipster in Union Square is like calling for their like poodle. Dewey Dell.
Well, it has an adjective, like in it, Dewey.
Yeah.
Like,
it's just a very weird. Like when you look at all of the other names, like Daryl, Cora, like Vardaman, like everything's
Addie.
so like Dewey Dell doesn't even like to. I mean, maybe that was a Southern name, but like the other ones are like very like. I could see you in the south, but Dewey Dell, it's like...
It also, like, it almost makes me think of a Lullaby with, like, oyster and, like...
Oh, yes.
Those are some weird names.
Yeah.
I actually really like the name Daryl. I don't know what it is. It's just so, like, different. And not necessarily, like, in the scope of the story, but,
I
like,
love that.
relative to anything that we would meet today.
All of these names make me only ever want to say them with a southern accent. Like, Vardaman, Daryl, Dewey Dell.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you sweet southern thing.
Like, yeah. I don't know. And I think what made me also uncomfortable with this story is that, like, I went to South Carolina for my friend's graduation and her wedding. And as nice as, like, her husband's family and everything was, like, just it was definitely, like, a culture shock for me just going to the South because of the way everybody spoke and the mannerisms, the social expectations of, like, how to conduct yourself in public and, like, things like that. It was really passive aggressive, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable.
Mark, who was my business expert, he's from Georgia, but he would tell me, like, different things, like if somebody comes up to you and says, like, aren't you precious is not a good thing.
Or
I lived in Atlanta for 7 years.
Also the first thing.
Heart.
Yeah, exactly.
The first thing they warned me about, and this is actually on the plane to South Carolina. I sat next to a woman who was going home to North Carolina because I had a layover there. And she was like, "Is this your first time to the Carolinas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've never been anywhere remotely south." And she was like, "Oh, okay. If somebody tells you, bless your heart, you just fuck them right. You just flip them off right there." And I was like, "Why? What does that mean?" And she was like, "They're basically saying, like, a very polite, yeah, fuck you." Like, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Accurate.
But at the same time, Southern hospitality is a very real thing.
That was like, that was also something, is like at every restaurant I went to, I wanted to give them like a 50% tip because I was like, just, you guys are so nice, and like you ask me about my family, and like it was really cool to like have that. Also, the fried chicken is something else. Like,
it's interesting visiting the South, especially if you like get away from touristy areas and you get to more just like what the true South is. Like, for a lot of like culture and things, like, it's like a place lost in time. Like, you just don't experience a lot of that. Louisiana too. Like, if you get into the backwoods of Louisiana, like, you feel like you've gone back in time. And the food's amazing.
I really want to go to New Orleans.
It seems like they're stuck almost just like antebellum minus the slavery.
And from that point on, we just kind of trailed off into other topics that had nothing to do with the book, and then we didn't revisit the book until maybe 2 hours after that. So, and I had stopped recording at that point because I wasn't sure when we were going to go back to the topic of the book. If you do want to read along with my book club, we already have our book selected for the month of August. So we have over a month to finish I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai, and I think I said that right. Probably not. I never say these names right. But anyway, we are going to be reading I Am Malala. I will be posting about reading I Am Malala on my Instagram, which is Read, Write, Drink Coffee, which you can find in the description down below. So if you do want to give your thoughts and feelings about the book in the comments, or if you want to direct message me, you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching and listening to our discussion and participating in the discussion in the comments below. I would love to talk to you guys and hear more about your thoughts and feelings about the book. But until my next review, I will definitely see you guys later.